but we've got tent cities as well. There is poverty. These things have been going on for a long time, and we really haven't seen a pandemic like this, we could say, in the Western world properly like this ever. Now, when we look at India or the Middle East areas like that, they have gone through smaller lockdowns on and off over the years. It's been just a thing that's been happening, but I think we've been too complacent. And again, it's not like I'm saying everything that's happening is all right, but it's a time to sort of go back within and see the finer things in life that don't cost money, spending time with family, working on ourselves, projects, hobbies, getting back to basics. But I think the inner work is where this comes down to as well. And this is where manifesting, changing one's thoughts. I saw something with Joe Dispenza the other day talking about, I think it was 60 to 70,000 thoughts we have a day. And if we look at a percentage of them that are negative, or I'm not worthy, or we always seem to look at the cup, we could say, with a lot of people in humanity, is half empty rather than half full. And this is where we've got to get back to the basics of swapping the mindset into a positive outlook, because once we start to feel that in the cells of the body and we're thinking in that way, like James Gilliland says, who you know, my good friend, the mind you seek is the mind that you connect with. So basically you're putting out and changing that thought format. You start to bring things into alignment. And I think some of that has to do with the type of environment that we're in and the setting, meaning the people we surround ourselves with as well. So even for me, I try to always be around people that inspire me, in a way of wanting to be a better person, but are uplifting as well. And I like to be that for other people as well. So I think there's a lot to this, but I think we've almost, I don't know if we've seen the start of it or if we're halfway through this sort of situation that we're in on a global scale, but it really does come down to the mindset.
I couldn't agree more. I love that you mentioned Joe Dispenza's work, because I feel like he's one.
Oh, he's a legend. He's an absolute legend. Yeah,
he hit the ground running into mainstream, and people are really resonating with his work, and it translates into the kind of work we do, right? Because the only way we were able to get to this point that I guess we're quite satisfied with our life at the moment, and to keep on growing, is to visualize and to feel centered in who we are as individuals. Right. And so no matter what happens in our external circumstances, the internal world still stays stable. You know,
definitely. I think with that too, it's like the R part of the brain, the reptilian brain, like when we keep getting triggered and we're in survival mode, which a lot of us are in, it comes back to what I'd say to get out of that, being the observer rather than reactionary mind. Because when we're the observer, you actually come back to the present. So it's like your energies, instead of leaking it forward or back in terms of when it goes forward, it's like, what if this happens? What if that happens? Or when we go back, it could go back to, you know, past traumas, wrong conclusions, judgment on ourselves, judgment on others. And that's really a key with this, is being the observer and always knowing that God's got this, that no matter what doors close, as long as you're being true to you, the door's eventually going to happen and come into fruition, and you're going to go through it knowingly or not, as long as you stay in truth. But it's knowing that and embodying that. It's like having faith in that. And when we drop trying to control a situation which is out of our hands, which this sort of situation is, it comes back to the individual changing themselves. And enough of us do it, the collective is actually going to change as a whole. And this is what we could say is a form of ascension process, which I think the term gets thrown about a lot with people not understanding it. Meaning there is light beings, there's obtaining the rainbow light body, there is going to a new earth or another dimension, raising our frequency or density. But the basic form is just raising our frequency here in the earth human experience and embodying the experience being in now. Too many people want to be going, you know, I want to be in the fifth dimension, this and that, and it's not putting that down, that's fine. But we're here, and we've got to deal with what's right in front of us. And so it's a situation where we will work through this, but it's being the observer and acknowledging that which we need to work on, or the things that are triggering us as well.
No, definitely. And interesting to point out is with when we are the observer, right, that allows us to really see things in a more objective point of view. Right? Because if I have past conclusions that, or trauma that I'm trying to deal with, and I react to things in ways that are coming from a wounded place, right? I'm going to then continue a path of wrong conclusions, which is something that can be taken very personally because things are constantly changing in our world all the time, and people are responding to others in many different ways, even for something like politics and opinions, right? People are coming into this kind of what feels like a very egoic state where they're kind of putting up these walls and saying, I'm right, and if you're not, then you can shoo away. And they're not being compassionate and open and loving to their neighbors, which is unfortunately, I feel like something that we have to learn as humanity. Because like you're saying, then the more we're able to raise our individual frequency, it's like we're putting another drop in the bucket. And that's the drop of like the bucket of humanity. We want to fill that all up so we can raise it.
100%. And this is where compassion comes in terms of even looking back on one's past, we could say, traumas or things that have happened. I don't think a lot of the time we look at a situation from another person's point of view. Why did the person do this? What were they going through? Having compassion for that as well, and forgiveness and releasing that. But we do have a situation where, unfortunately, not just in this community, but the world, whether it's politics, religion, or whatever. And again, I'm not bashing anyone, and I won't do that. It's not in my nature. But I think, unfortunately, most of the world runs by a belief system and not a knowingness. Now, with that said, I don't even know 0.000 times many zeros, 0.1 again, or whatever, of a trillion% of what's going on. But I do know what I know from personal experience. And this is where what we don't know, we've just got to accept that, but we've got to be open to all possibility at the same time. But with that said, I am seeing a shift in human consciousness at the moment, especially with doing the appointments and things that I've been doing, especially the last year. I have seen people that are completely new to this open up, and even going down the rabbit hole where I could, they're open to hearing that. Where a year before that, 5 years before it, I would do people's heads in with the complexity, which to me is really simple, the more deeper we go, because it's what we know on a soul level. So there is this shift happening where people are opening up, whether it's to corruption, conspiracy, to health sciences and stuff that's not published in mainstream, even though some of this has got a lot of validity to it, and there's been repeated experiments in certain areas. We're seeing this shift in human consciousness that it's taking time, but there's been a definite leap in the last year. So that's a good sign that there is this shift going on.
Definitely. And I'm curious to know for you, there are people that are more open to this kind of new information that's coming out, even though it might be censored or considered alternative. There are people who are naturally going to be more open to this information, and then others are going to close off. So from your understanding of this dimension and other ones, what do you think is a way that we can learn to communicate better with people that are of different kinds of vibrations and frequencies? How can we kind of go past that barrier that seems to kind of divide us as humans? And I mean, on top of that, all the powers that be, the systems that are in place are meant to divide us. So how do we surpass that from your point of view?
It sounds simple, but it's harder than what it sounds as well, but it's coming from a place of love and acceptance. Now, it's like having people with different religions. All right, you want to believe in what you want to believe in, completely cool with that. But why does there need to be an argument or a war over it? How can one prove that their God's existence over the next one? And when we sort of look at the Quran, Judeo-Christian, or Jews and Christians, it's all the same thing. And then it's like, all right, why can't it all have some validity? Of course, it's not all going to be 100% true. But I know that even from my own interactions, like to me, and I'm not putting this down with other people again, I've got to say this, but for me in the last couple of years, the way that the experiences have gone, when we look at extraterrestrials, that's even child's play, because once you break through the few dimensions up for us and the densities of consciousness, you start to break through, which is to me the other 90%, of pure realms that have got nothing to do with planets, nothing to do with star systems. And then you break through to what I call the geometric light realms, which some could describe as the angelic kingdom. There's many different names that people could term that, where everything's fractal geometry, there's intelligences in it, and then you break through to source. Now, I've experienced a lot of this, especially the topper part, and once you break through that, you start to realize, geez, this God, this consciousness is a cell of a greater intelligence, and you go, this is how big and beautiful it is. I had to stop there because I'm like, I can't even digest this any further. But what it showed me was that the love frequency with it is what changes everything. And so like John Vivanco, who I'm sure you know, John and I was talking one day and he said, Pete, it's literally like when you're in a negative mood and people wondering why they're not getting contact, it's because if they're in a lower frequency, you might as well be throwing a brick at them. Mm-hmm. And so if we take that to the human collective consciousness, we see effects like Dr. Emoto's work, writing love on a piece of paper, you get the ice crystals, and what you get is beautiful geometry. Now, our body's made up of a lot of water. And so we've got the flip side of, if you're thinking negatively, what you get is these sort of chipped up, murky looking ice crystals if you got hate written on it. And that's the frequency. So our body being made up of a lot of water, being in a place of acceptance, non-judgment, it's the ego part that goes, oh, I've got to be right. You can't be right. I've got to be right because of this, 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 and this. And the other person could go and have scientific evidence and go, well, this, and this proves that you're wrong. So no matter what angle people are coming at it from, they're always going to find a loophole on their end to make what they're saying is correct. And I'll tell you now, even from personal experience, even with the ETs and going up from that to what I call the angelics, there is times that they aren't giving false information, but they're not giving me the full picture, because if they did, I wouldn't be able to digest it. So there's baby steps. And it's like, hang on, you told me this, but now you're telling me this. And they're like, well, you wouldn't understand this if I didn't tell you this. So there is this process, even when you've got an open heart, that you have to go in baby steps, and that when you're ready, the information will come. But it does come back to being of service to others, having gratitude, and even just simple things like, what have you done today that's helped one person that's external from you? Now, I do say we do have to be selfish and look after number one first, because when you do that, your energies are full, and that means you can give at 100% to everyone else. When you're constantly energy leaking, your energies deplete, and then soon you become useless. So there is this situation where people need to think, you know, when you give, this is the biggest thing I think, even for me, is that with the dark side of what I've experienced, whether it's been black ops or surveillance or stalking, weird things like that, although I'm in the public eye and things like that are happening, the gifts that I've been able to help people help themselves far outweighs anything. And that gives me a feeling that can't be matched with money or ego of people coming to me saying this or saying that. It can't be matched. So I think this is like a time now where there's this shift happening. And first, all the purging needs to happen. So we're going purging on an individual level, but also a collective level. And when we come out of this, it's going to be something where we can create heaven on earth. Even with science, technologies, everything's got to do with the level of consciousness that we're operating at. So once we purge this and we start to sort of level out, where we can go beyond the sky literally is the limit.
And that love frequency is something that is, I think, super powerful, can actually change the world. Because you look at the opposite of love, people say that it's fear, right? And that's literally the battle that we are essentially
operating in. Yeah,
we're in it. And it's not like it's a new thing. It's been around for millennia, right? But that's the systems and the programs at play are to try and pit people and ideas and beliefs all against one another and to fear one another, rather than say, what can I learn from you, right? And take, even if there is, like you said, essentially like disinformation, it serves its own purpose later on, because it depends on our own level of understanding and our own consciousness and awareness. So how do you think then our perceptions and our experiences can either limit us or free us in this world?
Well, I think where it limits us is by things that haven't worked out in the past. Now, I'm somebody that when I get into something, I get into it until I stop, and until I have a breakthrough with it, let's say. But what happens? Just say you go to do something and you get smacked for it, as a child. Well, over time, what's going to happen is you're going to stop doing that. Now, it doesn't mean that when you get to an adult, you can't have a chance of doing whatever that is. Now, if somebody smacks you, most likely there's not a chance that that's going to happen. But it's a stupid analogy, but what I'm trying to get to is usually from things as childhood trauma and things like that, they affect us when we're older, sometimes unbeknown to us, from a situation of fear or trauma that we've gone through. It's sort of like, all right, you get older, you could have an opportunity doing whatever it is, but because of, we could say, almost subliminal training in the past, example getting smacked, you're not going to go any further, because if you do, there's this sort of programming in you that like you're not going to have a good result because it never worked out in the past. And I know that this is sort of a stupid analogy off the top of my head, but that's what it is a lot of the time, is that when things haven't worked out in the past, we think into the future going, it's still not going to work out. So what happens is we drop it, or we settle for second best. But this is where I'll use another analogy. It's like you might be hell-bent on getting a, let's say, a brand new Hyundai car, right? And no matter what you do, like it's not that expensive, but yeah, it's a new car. God might be trying to give you a brand new Tesla. And all you're focusing on is this Hyundai, and God's trying to throw you bones left, right, and center, trying to steer you into this direction to give you something that you actually deserve, but you're blocking it. So this is where I think once we work through the inner trauma wrong conclusions and all that stuff that we go through as a child, and I think everyone on the planet's got something. I don't care who they are or how epic they think they are. Everyone's got something. But once we sort of get to this place that we realize that we're all one consciousness interacting with itself, you start to realize that this is a game on some level, that really, this is your consciousness out here. This is the subconscious. Everyone says this is the subconscious, this is the conscious. No, this is your unbounded part. That basically from up there, you're holding a video controller that's controlling the game, meaning the human body experience. And so it's something that, look, if people aren't open to this, they're not going to get it. But what we are seeing is more and more people opening up to this. And it's not settling for second best and opening up for all possibility and allowing God to put its hands upon you and also work through you. And this is where, until those sorts of things are done, and I'm not meaning from a religious point of view, though it can be from that, it's all about the person who views this reality through their lens, really. But until those types of things are done and people submit to just like, we're here for the earth experience to gain knowledge, experience. Yes, some of us have got, we could say missions, which is really passion and purpose. Because those two things entwined, it's not work, but it's also service to others at the same time. So it's a tricky situation, but I think a lot of the time it's just the past things that have happened to us that block us in the future. And when we realize that, and it's just a story, you come to a place where you realize it's just a story. Like if everyone I knew all of a sudden didn't exist, but everyone else on the planet did, like what would happen is it would shatter, it could even shatter my ego, because it's like all of a sudden nobody knows who Peter Maxwell Slatery is. Nobody cares. I'm just a being here. But at the same time, all the crap that I would think about me and what other people would think about me is completely gone. So this is a way that you can analyze that at the end of the day, everything's just a story, and it's up to you what story you want to live, because it's create your own reality time. This stuff about timelines, from what's been shown to me, since 2012, they smashed together and there was this void. And
Hello. Peter's not here yet. I sent the link on Messenger here. Is the stream still going? Okay. Oh, people can see us. Hello. No, we don't. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm sure you can still hear me. We just had some small technical difficulties here, but we are getting it solved. We do apologize. But we do have Pete back on here. Hi, Pete.
Good. There we go.
Hi. We lost you there for a moment. But we are back. Okay, so looks like people can see us. You can hear us. You can see us. Great.
Cool.
Alrighty. So I guess we could just continue talking. So
yeah. So like I was just saying in that part, look, what I want people to think about is this is create your own reality time. People talking about timelines, this and that. From what I know, even with later information I found out from Project Looking Glass and that, they couldn't see beyond 2012. What it was is now's create your own reality time. And we're too hell-bent on what we're doing is when we're hell-bent on a certain way, we bring that into projection into reality. We've got to get into create our own reality time. Make it exciting. We're gods. We don't do boring things. We left source to go out within source to experience and gain knowledge. Let's bring some fun and joy back into it, which is a big thing as well. What are we doing to bring joy, laughter, and love and bliss back into this existence? We've got stagnant and stale.
Oh yeah, gosh, I could just feel that in my heart. I love that you were talking about changing our stories, and to really like if our identities disappeared right now, where would we go? What would we do? Right? We can choose anything that we want to do. There's a reason I chose to do something like this interview, right? Because it brings me joy. It makes me feel aligned, and I'm sure it's the same with the work you do, right?
Yeah.
It all makes us feel like we can express ourselves in our most, I would say, most human way, but also just using our humanness to express our like source-like energy through ourselves. And it's absolutely beautiful and very fun. I'm sure many people in our audience can agree when you find something that you love and you really go for it, doors will just naturally open. You don't really have to do much. I mean, outside of like create it in your mind and feel it, but that's kind of it. I mean, at least it's my experience with many things that whether I knew I wanted it or not, things kind of just showed up and you have to roll with it.
Yeah. And that's the hard thing is going with the flow with things, I think it is, because I say this with people that are trying to make contact and doing the modalities as well, is that one thing, as long as like, yes, clearings are involved, making sure that you're in a good space, but when you let go, that's where the results happen. And it's not just for contact, but it's our own day-to-day life. It's like an analogy I use a lot, and I use a lot of analogies, but imagine for a moment that you're a molecule of water in a river. Now, you've got the flow of the river. Now, there's going to be obstacles. There's going to be rocks, rubbish, fish, plant life. But what happens is if you go with the flow, what does water do? It goes above, below, and around it. But when we go into reactionary mind, that's the equivalent of you being that water droplet getting stuck on that rock for a moment until water comes and you're ready to go with the flow and it washes you off and you go with the flow again. Mm-hmm. So there's this situation where you can't fight certain things. And it's just trying to be at peace with that. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people because they need to be in control. But when you become at peace with it, the real joy starts to flow. And that's part of self-mastery as well. It's just trying to let go.
And I feel many people say, trust the process, right? Trust all these different things. It truly is about trusting yourself to know that whatever will happen, you'll be able to handle it, right? Whether it can be perceived as something extremely dark and negative or positive, you will learn something from the experience and you'll be able then to take that, put it into like your book of knowledge of being on earth, right? And continue on in this life and wherever else we'll go afterwards. And it's a resource. This is all a time to really be resourceful. And I'm really happy you mentioned, Pete, about clearings and doing things like that. Because I think that in like the mainstream world, many people are all about love and light, which is great. You know, it has its place and its purpose. But there is something to be said about knowing what's your energy, clearing your own field, you know, and being very, I guess, using discernment on what one involves themselves in.
Definitely. And this is a really good point for a couple of reasons. So one is, in one aspect, some extraterrestrials, and what I'd say those beyond those realms, they don't see you as a human. They know that you're having a human experience. But what they really see is your light body and this realm structured from light. And the negative can see when you're about to burst and step into your power, and they want to sort of stop that. And they do that through negative thoughts, draining energies, things like that. Now, this is where what it comes down to is that the negative do have a purpose, and it is another facet of God like we all are. what this is it's helping us realize what we don't want. And once you realize what you don't want, meaning I don't want to feel like this, I don't want these psychic attacks, I don't want this, I don't want that. Now, at the end of the day, we need to take responsibility with this, because what happens is if you raise your frequency, anything of a lower vibration cannot touch you up here. But when you're down here and you're not aware of this, or you're not taking control of the situation and owning your own stuff as well, these energies come and go. And it's not to say that everything's an archon, everything's a reptilian that's going on. No, they can come through an exacerbated situation or thought forms that you're having and feelings and things of that nature. But it comes back to taking control, because what happens is, stuff it. I don't want to feel like this. I'm sick of this crap. I'm sick of this, sick of that. It's not serving me. It's not helping me be a better person. What happens is eventually you start working on yourself. You're bringing love, joy, bliss in. You raise your frequency. These things just can't vibe with you anymore. And that's what's happening now, is we are going through this, not just individually, but also as a collective. And if we all did this, all this would still be in existence, but it couldn't touch us. Absolutely. And it's all got to do with the love frequency.
And it's being, basically, you're saying it's to be a vibrational match of something, right? The only way we can attract certain things is if we have that vibrational frequency that's tuned in into the same match as whatever else is out there, right? So it's, if we're able to then, so what would you say then about, from your understanding, then what about like soul contracts, and when people have certain milestones like that they have to hit on this earth, or darker experiences, what can be perceived as darker stuff? Do you feel that they have naturally attracted that to themselves, or the experience was already supposed to be here like that way? What's your take on something like that?
This is where it's like, it's not black or white, because the shade in the middle is beyond 50 shades of grey, we could say. But it really is. So some of this is, it's like we're going through the motions, but there is certain things that happen that can take us on a turn, that sometimes through soul meetings, which continues, people think there's a soul contract when you come in, that's it, that's what you got to do. There's many times monthly that people are going up into the other realms, that are having meetings with the councils and beings that they're working with, and things are being altered because so many things are going on. We've got, what, 7 billion beings on this planet? Can you imagine what's just not within the 2 trillion galaxies in the visible universe that we know of? But like I said, that's not even 5% once you go up the planes and dimensions with the extraterrestrial civilizations. You've got all this. So things are in a constant state of change. It's like us, something doesn't work out. All right, we want to get from point A to point B. What are we going to do? Something else. Same thing happens on a soul contract, but it's not settling going, all right, I'm just meant to be single, or I'm just meant to be living like this, or I'm just, never meant to have a job, or I'm never meant to have abundance. That's where getting stuck in that mindset will attract that. It's working through that, because what's happened in the Earth human experience is we're a conglomerate of many different races. Now, we are basically super beings in the 3D realm, but a byproduct of that was our emotions are extreme both ways, up and down. And it's about leveling it out and then rising it so we can adjust to those higher frequencies. Because from my understanding, we've even got components of us that are even angelic, that we can do things that even those beings can't do. So what happens is everything's amplified, and it's all possibility. It's not getting stuck in one way. It's seeing all possibility.
Great. So then, Peter, tell us then, what have you been up to in the past year or so with the abundance and possibility that you've been creating? So I know that last year you started off, I believe, with a conference at ECETI, Australia.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
So kind of give us a playback of what has happened for you in this past year, and what do you plan on doing next in this upcoming 2021?
Well, there was a couple of books I got done. I went back and actually did a 3rd edition of every other book as well. So there's 7 books now. A lot of time alone in the cabin here. There is a feature film about to come out through 1091 Productions, which I worked on and did the whole thing with a handful of well-known people in the community that I'm sort of not going to say much more on that, but that was a lot of work. It's we should hopefully see trailers soon to that and a releasing of that. And also, let's just say there might be somewhere, or there is going to be somewhere soon, that people will be able to come and visit and do workshops with me as well. So there's things that I don't want to say yet, but people are going to see the fruit of working your butt off and helping others in the next year. And it's so I can continue to help people around the world in a more beneficial way and productive way than what I have in the past, because it's upping the ante now. So it's been quite a journey, but of course with COVID and things like that, there's been a lot of restrictions, not being able to see people in a lot of alone time, but that can be challenging at times, but that's helping me go through that work so I can show others how to go through that work as well.
Awesome. Well, Peter, could you tell us then also, with this, a lot of this alone time, what can our audience, if they're kind of struggling with certain things in their lives and they want to kind of break through certain walls that they have, or they just can't seem to break through some things, what can you suggest for people that are having this alone time and they want to break through, but they can't seem to get past certain, whether it's traumas or misunderstandings, and they're just hitting a wall? What can you suggest for someone who has practiced getting through these walls?
I think sometimes it's the basic things. Look, I do recommend meditation to a point where once you close your eyes and you observe the surroundings, meaning the sounds, and you observe the awakened mind within, what happens is you start to realize you're out here and not in here. That's one way. But look, some people can't meditate. They can. I think that the people that are very active in the mind, that type of thing, and the guide techniques that I go through with people with, I think they start to realize, geez, I've been having contact, or I've been able to go within all along. But people forget the basics. Some people, it might be swimming laps in a pool. Some people might be going for a hike or a walk. What are people doing to bring joy in? A lot of the times, the simple things, it might be just going for a bike ride, and people zone out. And not only are you getting exercise, which is good for mind, body, and spirit, but it can be therapeutic for the mind, just letting go. And once you get to that state, you realize that a lot of the things that we worry about actually aren't such a big deal. It's because we're so sometimes obsessed with what others are doing more so than what we're doing with ourselves, that this seems to be a big deal. But the basic things, eating well, exercising, what are your hobbies? Now, of course, people are locked down, but there's stuff that they can still do or catch up on that they've been wanting years to do, and now they've got the time. And sometimes in that state, is when epiphanies and concepts and aha moments can come through. I forget which scientist it was, but there was one scientist, it might have been Einstein or one of them. I remember reading a while back that every time they got stuck on an equation, they'll just go and sweep the floors in their workshop or do something mundane. The answer would come through. And then they'll go and fix the equation and problem solved. So sometimes when we're hell-bent on fixing a situation and not leaving it in God's hands and trying to control it, it ends up being this sort of knot energetically. But when we let go and we bring some joy and grounding things into our life, it could even be just ringing up, a girlfriend and having a talk on the phone. It could be putting on music on and dancing around the house, I say to a lot of people. Everyone loves music. I think when we get spiritual, we forget about all the things that bring us joy, because we get so obsessed and serious going, geez, we realize how this world can be, but how it isn't. And so we go on this continuous path of just being obsessive and compulsive with everything's a conspiracy theory and everything's this or that. But there's got to be a balance there, some middle ground. And I think when you get that, you can start to sort of balance out your energies.
Oh yeah, I know that. I can definitely attest to that, where when we have that balance from going into this research phase, right, and getting and trying to be all serious in the spiritual realm, but then taking time to also just be human and enjoying life, truly, yeah. That's like the sweet spot. Like that's when you really get to kind of have 2 feet in both worlds, and things don't seem, I don't know, they don't seem as serious, which sounds silly, but things don't seem as serious in a good way, where you're not overstressed about things. Like you're aware, you're conscious of things that are happening, but you can still enjoy life and not feel like you have to live in a bunker. Like
100%. No, but that's exactly the way. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Like, and you've got it on the head. Like that's exactly what it is. We're here for the Earth human experience. So it's like, I don't know about you, but even me, yeah, I was in a lot of bands and a drummer and this and that, but it's like, and I was rapping as well, but I'm getting back into like the last couple of years. I actually just wake up in the morning after I do my affirmations and my exercises and modalities. I just put on some music. Lately, I've been listening to Offspring, which I haven't listened to for nearly 20 years. And it's just, that's not spiritual, but hey, it's a light vibe. It's pumpy. It gets me going for the day. And it's like, cool,
Yeah.
So it can be very simple things.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think it's interesting also to look at it from an energetic perspective. I feel like if you look at things from like masculine and feminine energy, right? Like masculine energy tends to be more like quiet and introspective. And so like that meditation, to sit and meditate, is like a completely different experience than throwing on like some music in the kitchen and dancing. Like it's
Yeah.
two completely different energies, but they can still come to the same conclusions. It's just depending on where someone what you want to practice at that time, because we all have masculine and feminine energies within us, so it's not a thing of gender by any means.
But that's where, when doing different things and mixing things up, what happens is you allow for new energies to come through, which is very productive. Otherwise we can get very stale and stagnant. So mixing it up every now and then, nothing wrong with it.
Awesome. All right, Peter. Well, I think we'll have to probably end this at the moment, but it's been absolutely wonderful to talk with you, Pete. Like I said, it's been a while since we got to chat, and I would love for our audience to know, where can we connect with you? I mean, you have a website, right?
Yeah, they can go to petermaxwellslattery.com or ecitiaustralia.org. Of course, they can look up those names on social media as well. I'm basically just on the normal ones. I haven't gone to Parler or anything else. I hardly have time for it alone, but Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and they can keep up to date there, and also sign up to the newsletters on the websites.
Awesome. That's great. Could you mention one more thing? When we were talking, you said that other beings see us as just light bodies. Like they know we're human. Well, we're having a human experience, but they see us as our light bodies. So could you explain that a little more?
So everything is consciousness and awareness, right? Which goes into a vibratorial state, which is sound, vibration. That creates light. Light creates physical matter. So being beyond, we could say, the material universe, they're in what are called the light realms. And so there's an interplane in between all vibrations, and that interplane is the same interplane in between each place. So if I go between these two places, when I go up here, this place that's in between the next two places is the same place. The interplane's the same place in between each vibration. Now, when they're out of phase here, a lot of the time, especially lately, I've been getting into this because I've been talking about crafts and beings appearing as mist because they can't fully materialize. So they're almost just trying to break through, but because they're really a light being, or they're operating in that, they try to break through and they can't so much, so they might appear like a smoke or a cloud, which is repeated in the Bible. God appearing as a pillar or cloud, or appearing as a cloud at the tabernacle in the tents, and I can't even remember the name of things at the moment. My mind's just everywhere. But what I'm saying is there's a lot outside our frequency. Like I talk about the crafts landing on us like a ghost, like an apparition. There's some footage I'm about to release actually on the documentary at James's, where I had a few friends with me and we had a cigar craft about 20 meters in front of us, about 3 foot off the ground in apparition form, because I hadn't fully materialized. So these beings are there. They're operating in a different vibration. So to us, that's how they appear. So what's happening is, because some of them, or I'd even say a majority of them, don't have a physical body like you and I have a physical body, they're operating in their light body. And so what happens is, because they're operating in that spectrum, when they try to tune into us, a lot of the time what they're seeing is light. They're seeing everything structured from light, because us right now, we can only see a fraction of 0.005% of physical matter, which is the visible light spectrum. But where they're operating, they've got a whole broader range of that visible light spectrum, and even more. They're able to see infrared, gamma rays, X-rays, everything. And so this is why a lot of people, when they tune in with the pineal gland and they just see a color, what's happening is they're interfacing sometimes with another intelligence in their light body. It might be a pink light beam, it might be a rainbow light beam, whatever. And they just see a color. What's happening is they're meeting them halfway through the pineal gland, because the pineal gland and the eyes, we don't see with them. What's happening is the information's coming through into the pineal gland and the eyes, and the brain is decoding what it's allowing us to see depending on what our frame of reference is. So some things would even be a screen memory, a made up memory in real time, because you can't digest in the human brain what's going on. So it's complicated, but it's not. And I hope it's being articulated okay, because it's hard for me to sort of give you and anyone a reference point of what I experience, because there's words when you're experiencing this, like a lot of the time, as people are aware, when I'm filming the crafts, I'm on the craft looking back at myself because I'm connected to their consciousness. So in my mind, like a dream time, I'm seeing things from their perspective, and sometimes I can see them as a human. Other times I'm seeing the area that I'm in structured from light. And a lot of times that's with the beings that are what I would say are in their Merkaba. They're in a light vehicle. They're not in the physical nuts and bolts craft. So this is where we're experiencing things in, we could really say 4D, because the 3 dimensions, but also the 4th is time. And we're confined by time because of the moon circling us compared to where it is with the earth. And then we're rotating around the sun. That opens up a gate for hyperdimensional physics, the 3rd dimensional reality, which we experience. If the moon wasn't here, time and everything would be completely different for us. And that's why it's different on every planetary body, depending on how the moon goes around that body and how that's going around its star. So it's all about how you're viewing this reality from your lens. And from the lens, as you go up in a light body, and then you go into a vibratorial state where you basically just vibration, like a gaseous mass of just energy. Once you break through to that, you break through to nothingness. And that's where it gets really interesting, because you're plugged into what we could say is the wireless internet, the whole universe, all planes and dimensions and densities instantaneously. And this is a joke at that point, what we're talking about now. And it's not putting what you and I are doing down, but you look down at this stuff and you're like, ooh, you know, that's child's play. But to us, we've lost awareness of that. And that's part of the human experience, is that what I've been told is we can't remember everything for a few reasons. One, we would jumpstart the human civilization too far ahead of what it should be at. And 2, we wouldn't be doing certain missions and things that we're meant to do. If we knew them, we wouldn't do them. So there's this sort of convoluted catch-22 scenario that's going on. And I'm sure other things that I'm not aware of either.
It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So then do you think that, do we have any kind of free will from your understanding of the dimensions? Like, do we have a free will of choice? Or if we're kind of looked at as like toddlers kind of in this realm of reality and our understanding, like, do we have that choice, or are the choices already made for us in some way or another by a higher?
Everything's orchestrated from this level. So this aspect of you up here would be going, this is a child. But your real part of you up here is all knowing. When you're in this state, you know everything that has and ever will happen. You know everything. All it doesn't matter what time's not an issue up here. But there is what I call the fallen Elohim. So this part up here is your Elohim self, which is a cell of God's body. So if you imagine your body as God, and each cell that makes up the body is a cell of God, well, those cells are the Elohim. And what happens is we divide off from that and go fractal. So we don't really have past lives. Past lives is a concept that they gave me to understand what I'm telling you now, which is this cell comes out of God's body and it goes fractal, and it's experiencing many realms and dimensions and densities all at the same time. And each cell is a Merkaba. And what you do in this life here, that information will go to all your other lives, and what all the other lives are doing will go into your Merkaba at the same time, because they've got a symbiotic relationship. And through the Godhead, everything's got a symbiotic relationship. But what's happened is the fallen Elohim of the highest kind. Now, there's good, we could say, as we perceive it, and then those that fell. All of them fall to experience other realms and dimensions. And there is different types of Elohim, different colors, different variations. The ones that came down are the ones that have created the artificial intelligence to hold a frequency. So what's happening is they keep everything trapped in that frequency, or so they think. And through fear, negativity, the things that we're going through, it feeds the artificial intelligence, which holds this vibrational grid to keep them in existence outside of God's state, because they want to stay out of it, because they're like gods in a physical form. It's different for them. And they like the control, the manipulation. Now, this is where it gets down to, if you allow, when you leave the body, to be, we could say, affected by these lower realms, because sometimes when you leave the body, you will go through lower realms first. But once you start to change your frequency in those lower realms, you instantaneously start popping through dimensions or realms, and you go up to the higher realms. And so when you leave the body, if you allow it, you can be allowing yourself to be trapped in the lower dimensions and then even come back and do things again. Or once you acknowledge it, you go up. And what was interesting was Dr. Ibn Alexandra, who was, I believe, a neurosurgeon. He thought all this was crap, and he died. I think it was from meningitis. And they said he was clinically dead. And he went through these murky realms, which are very much like these reptilian type grey entities he spoke about. And he said he changed his thought process. And this is what happened to me. I was like, this is a frigging doctor talking the same information. He'd been on Oprah and a lot of other things, really well known. And he said what happened was he started to appear in these beautiful realms. And all of a sudden there was a lady, I think it was on some type of dragon or something, that started taking him around all the realms and dimensions. And he came back to the body. Now, he could tell the doctors what they were doing to him. And what his theory was as a neuroscientist is that people's near-death experiences are in a certain part of the brain. But when he came back, he found out that that part was dead. So he debunked himself. And what was interesting was there was a photo that he hadn't seen for years, or he couldn't remember having, or he found. Don't quote me. This is a hard part to remember. But long story short, I believe it was his sister died when he was really young or before he was born. And it was his sister that took him around all the planes and dimensions before he was brought back. And he was like, that was my sister that guided me in the afterlife. Wow. And he's talking about when he changed his thought and his frequency, he got to the better realms. And he got to a state. Now, people hear these, when you go to the geometric light realms, what I can tell people, or when you go to the angelic kingdom and whatnot, people talk about this music. It's not music. It's the vibration of that dimension. So imagine if Earth was in a loving place, we would hear this cool vibration right now, which would sound like music. But we don't.
We didn't have all the tech around us to dampen it down.
Yeah, but once you go up, like when I'm in that state, you're in a vibrating, blissful, beyond orgasmic. It's beyond anything like that. And you are one with everything. And what's happening is you're resonating with that field. So it appears as music, but it's not actually music. But we could say it's music in one way, because everything's coming from a vibration. A tone is same with the guitar string.
Well, I'm sure many of us would love to check out what that place looks like and experience.
Well, you've been there. You just forgot it, and that's okay. You'll get back there. It's we're here to do this, but this is sort of the stuff that I'm talking about now. I don't talk about super heaps because I don't know how people take it. It's enough for me to try and put in human terms, but I hope it's digestible.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're doing an incredible job taking such, I wouldn't say they're abstract, but abstract to our most consciousness minds, taking and pulling it through a different dimension and there. I think it was a very fascinating, very, very cool to hear this kind of talk. And I'm sure our audience also definitely enjoys it as well. So Peter, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you everyone to our audience for being on the chat. Thank you for our moderators and just for everyone to be here and watch this presentation, our talk. It's been a wonderful time to talk with you, Pete. Thank you for coming on and taking the time.
Thank you, everyone.
The time difference is a little different, but I definitely appreciate it. And everyone that's subscribed, please, if you'd like to share this or just give it a like, we definitely appreciate it. And check out Pete's social media. If you want to check out 90 Degree Turns, check that out there. And yeah, we'll catch you guys on the next episode. So thank you again, Pete, and everyone. Have a wonderful evening or day wherever you are. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.